Soundings Audiobooks presents an unabridged recording of While We're Apart, written by Ellie Dean, read by Penelope Freeman. The moral right of the author has been asserted. Chapter 1. East Sussex, October 1942. It was Mary Jones's 18th birthday, but as usual it was a day like any other. She had received a hastily scrawled card and an absent-minded hug from her father, but there had been no acknowledgement of the occasion by her mother. Mary flicked her long dark hair back from her face, determinedly suppressed her disappointment, and walked quickly down the narrow country lane, the weight of her laden shopping basket dragging on her arm. It wasn't the lack of gifts that upset her, for at the rectory they were exchanged only at Christmas. It was her mother's cool disinterest towards her. She should be inured to it by now, and yet no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't quite manage not to be hurt by it, and that neediness for Emmeline's love and approval made her fretful. She plodded along the rough lane in her Wellingtons as fast as she could, for it was a bitterly cold morning, the wind scything across the empty patchwork of fields in the South Downs. She could feel the cut of it on her face and in her unshed tears, and she paused for a moment to dry her eyes, tuck her hair into her coat collar, and wrap the knitted scarf more firmly round her neck and over her mouth. She'd been queuing for almost half an hour outside the village grocery shop, and now her hands and feet were numb with the cold, despite her gloves, thick coat, and woolen socks. As she picked up the basket again and headed for home, she gazed out beyond the hedgerows to the iron-hard ploughed fields and the distant South Downs, which undulated beneath a leaden sky. She'd lived here all her life, and although she had no real wish to leave these familiar surroundings, there had been moments recently when she'd begun to yearn for something more, something different, perhaps even exciting, that would take her to new horizons. And now she was 18, there was a distinct possibility that this might happen, for she was no longer a student, and if she didn't decide quickly on what she wanted to do for the war effort, she would be assigned a job by the recruitment people. Her thoughts were in a whirl as she tramped along, for there were several possibilities, even for someone as unsophisticated and inexperienced as she was. She could become a land girl and stay in the village to work with Jack Boniface on his father's farm, which would mean they could see more of each other. However, even the allure of being with her darling Jack every day didn't make the job any more appealing, for she knew how tough it was to be up before dawn and out in all weathers until after dark. The land army needed a special breed of worker, and very few of the city girls, who'd had no idea of what they'd let themselves in for, had lasted more than a few weeks, and neither would she. As for office work, she didn't know one end of a typewriter from the other, and shorthand was a complete mystery. The idea of working in a factory didn't really appeal either, although according to her best friend Pat Logan, who caught the factory bus every morning with a group of other village girls, it was great fun and paid very well. It was also, she'd told Mary, a good way to make friends and see a bit of life at the parties and dances that were frequently held in the town for the Allied servicemen. But Pat had few responsibilities at home, was confident enough to meet new people and experience new things, and her mother didn't seem to mind her going to dances and staying out late. Mary paused again, gave a deep sigh and shifted the basket to her other hand. The only real talent she had was for singing and playing the piano, which wasn't exactly of much use to the war effort, and her parents disapproved of her doing either, unless it was in the schoolroom or the church. With a frown of anxiety she continued walking, and tried to dispel this sense of uselessness by concentrating on her surroundings. The village of Hairbridge Green sprawled between the farms and woodlands of East Sussex. The narrow lane running through it like a frayed grey ribbon led to the nearby market town of Hilney in the east, and the hamlet of Gorse Green to the west. Yet its isolation hadn't protected it, for it lay beneath the flight path of the enemy bombers on their way to London and the Midlands, and there were numerous reminders of that in the craters in the fields, the bullet holes scarring the walls of the Saxon church, and the shattered remains of a farmhouse and barn that had taken a direct hit. Mary again heaved the basket from one hand to the other, wishing fervently that she'd mended the puncture on her bike so this journey would have been easier. But what with one thing and another, there just hadn't been time. She trudged
Sample complete. Ready to continue?